Chapter 22. Two sides, same coin. So, what are you thinking? Asked Kali. Ganesh and Kali were in the Naga queen's quarters. After the drama that had unfolded earlier in the day, Shiva had carried Sati over to their room in Atithigwa's palace. Daksha, Virini and their entourage had departed immediately for the Meluhan capital, Devagiri. "This was unexpected," said a pensive Ganesh with a slight smile. Kali raised her eyes. "Sometimes your stoicism can be very irritating." Ganesh smiled, a rare broad smile from one floppy ear to the other, his extended teeth stretching farther out. "Now that's the face I want to see more of," said Kali. "You actually look cute." Ganesh's face turned serious again. He raised a papyrus scroll, a message from Panchavati. "I would have been laughing, Mossy, but for this." "What now?" asked Kali, frowning. "It's a failure." "Again?" "Yes, again." "But we thought wrong, Mossy." Kali cursed. Ganesh stared at his aunt. He could feel her frustration. A final solution was so close. Its success would have completed their victory. Now there was every chance that everything they had done would be lost. "Do we try again?" asked Kali. "I think we have to finally accept the truth, Mossy. This route is a dead end. We have no choice. The time has come to reveal the secret." "Yes," said Kali. "The Nilkant should know." "The Nilkant?" asked Ganesh, surprised at how much had changed in such a short span. Kali frowned. "You didn't use his name. You said the Nilkant. You believe the legend now?" Kali smiled. "I don't believe in legends, never have, never will. But I believe in him." How different would my life have been if fate had blessed me with a man like Shiva. Maybe like Didi, all the poison could have been sucked out of my life as well. Perhaps even I would have found happiness and peace. "We have to show him the secret," said Ganesh, intruding into Kali's thoughts. "Show him? I don't think it can be done here, right? He must see for himself." "You want to take him to Panchavati?" "Why not?" asked Ganesh. "Don't you trust him?" "Of course I do. I would trust him with my life, but he doesn't come alone. There are others who come with him. If we take them along, they will know how to get to Panchavati. This will weaken our defenses." "I think people like Parvateshwar and Bhagirath can be trusted, Mossy. I don't think they will ever go against the Nilkant. They would give their lives for him." "If there is one thing I have learnt in life," said Kali, "it is that one should not spread one's trust too thin and never take things for granted." Ganesh frowned. "If you doubt all his followers, then what about Parshuram? He already knows the way. You know his devotion to the Nilkant." "Remember, I have told you not to bring Parshuram to Panchavati. But you didn't listen." "So now what, Mossy?" "We will take them through Branga. They will know how to get to Panchavati, but only from Chandraketu's realm. They will never be able to reach us directly from their own kingdoms. The forests of Dandak would consume them if they were to even try. We can trust the Brangas to not let anyone pass without our permission. Even Parshuram doesn't know any other way." Ganesh nodded. "This is a good idea." Thank the Lord I didn't do anything rash that I would have regretted later, said Sati. Shiva was sitting on a long chair in the balcony of their chambers. Sati was on his lap, her head leaning against his muscular chest, her eyes swollen red. From the heights of the Kashi palace, the sacred avenue and the Vishwanath temple were clearly visible. Beyond them flowed the mighty Ganga. Your anger was justified, my darling. Sati looked up at her husband, breathing slowly. Aren't you angry? He actually tried to kill you. Shiva stared into his wife's eye as he ran his hand across her face. My anger towards your father is because of what he did to you, not what he tried to do to me. But how dared Vidunmali draw his sword upon you? Whispered Sati. Thank God, Ganesh. Sati stopped, afraid that her taking Ganesh's name would ruin this moment. Shiva gave her a gentle squeeze. He is your son. Sati kept quiet, body stiff, feeling the intense pain that Shiva felt at Brahaspati's loss. Shiva held Sati's face and looked straight into her eyes. No matter how hard I try, I cannot hate a part of your soul. Sati sighed as fresh tears escaped silently from her eyes. She held Shiva tight. Shiva did not want to spoil the moment as he held on to his wife. One thing continued to puzzle him. Who's Vrigu? The emperor had got Chandathwaj killed? Asked a shocked Parvateshwar. Yes, general, said Veerbhadra. Parvateshwar, numb with shock, looked at Anandamayi and Bhagirath, then back at Veerbhadra. Where is His Highness now? He is on his way back to Meluha, my lord, said Veerbhadra. Parvateshwar held his head. His emperor had brought dishonour to Meluha, his motherland. He couldn't even imagine the pain this revelation must have caused to the woman he had always looked upon as the daughter he had never had. Where's Sati? She is with Shiva, my lord. Anandamayi looked at Parvateshwar with a smile. At least some good had come out of this sordid episode. The Meluhan royal ship cruised slowly up the Ganga, 4 ships sailing around it in the standard Suryavanshi defensive naval protocol. Daksha's entourage was on its way home, a day away from Kashi. Maya Shrenik was in the lead boat, maintaining a steady pace. He was still shaken by the incidents at Kashi. He hoped his Emperor Daksha and the Nilkant would reconcile their differences. He wished to avoid the terrible fate of having to choose between his loyalty to his country and his devotion to his god. Vidunmali was in charge of security on Daksha's ship. He wanted to safeguard against any assassination attempt upon his emperor by the followers of the Nilkant. Even though it seemed unlikely, he wanted to take all the possible precautions. Virini sat in the royal chambers of the central ship, next to a window, watching the Ganga lap against the ship. She sensed that she had lost all her children now. She turned in anger towards her husband. Daksha was lying on the bed, eyes forlorn, a lost look on his face. It wasn't the first time he had faced and been overpowered by such terrible circumstances. Virini shook her head and turned to look out again. If only he had listened to me. Virini remembered that incident so clearly it was as if it had happened just yesterday. Almost every day she wondered how her life would have been if things had turned out differently. It had happened more than 100 years ago. Sati had just returned from the Maika Gurukul, a headstrong, idealistic girl of 16. In keeping with her character, she had jumped in to save an immigrant woman from a vicious pack of wild dogs. Parvateshwar and Daksha had rushed in to her rescue. While they had managed to push back the dogs, Daksha had been seriously injured. Virini had accompanied Daksha to the Ayur Alay, where the doctors could examine her husband. The most worrying injury was on his left leg, where a dog had ripped out some flesh, cutting through a major blood vessel. The loss of blood had made Daksha lose consciousness. When he had opened his eyes after a few hours, Daksha's first thought was of his younger daughter. "Sati?" "She's with Parvateshwar," said Virini as she came closer to her husband and held his hand. "Don't worry about her." "I screamed at her. I didn't mean to." "I know. She was only doing her duty. She did the right thing trying to protect that woman. I'll tell her that." No. "I still think she shouldn't have risked her life for that woman. I didn't mean to scream at her, that's all." Virini's eyes narrowed to slits. Her husband couldn't be any less Suryavanshi. She was about to say something when the door opened and Brahma Nayak walked in. Brahma Nayak, Daksha's father and ruler of Meluha, was a tall, imposing figure. Long black hair, a well-manicured beard, a practically hairless body, a sober crown, and understated white clothes could not camouflage the indomitable spirit of the man. He set impossible standards for all those around him with his own great deeds. He was not just respected but also feared in all of Meluha, obsessive about the honor and respect that his empire should garner. His son's lack of courage and character was a source of anger and dismay for him. Virini immediately arose and stepped back quietly. Brahmanayak never spoke to her unless to give orders. Behind Brahmanayak was the kindly doctor who had stitched up Daksha's leg after the severe mauling it had received. Brahmanayak, in a matter-of-fact manner, lifted the sheets to look at his son's leg. There was a bandage of neem leaves tied around it. The doctor smiled genially. "Your Highness, your son will be back on his feet in a week or two. I have been very careful. The scars will be minimal." Daksha looked for a brief instant at his father. Then, with his chest puffed, he whispered, "No, doctor. Scars are the pride of any Kshatriya." Brahmanayak snorted. "What would you know about being a Kshatriya?" Daksha fell silent. Virini began seething with anger. "You let some dogs do this to you?" asked Brahmanayak contemptuously. "I am the laughing stock of Meluha, perhaps even the world. My son cannot even kill a dog all by himself." Daksha kept staring at his father. To prevent a further escalation of hostility and to safeguard the patient's mental health, the doctor cut in. "Your Highness, I need to discuss something with you. May we talk outside?" Brahmanayak nodded. "I haven't finished," he said, turning to Daksha before walking out of the chamber. A livid Virini stepped up to her husband, who was crying now. "How long are you going to tolerate this?" Daksha suddenly turned ferocious. "He's my father. Speak of him with respect." "He does not care about you, Daksha," said Virini. "All that he cares about is his legacy. You don't even want to be king. So what are we doing here?" "My duty. I have to stay by his side. I am his son." "He doesn't think so. You are only someone who would carry forward his name, his legacy, that's all." Daksha fell silent. "He has forced you to give up one daughter. How much more are you going to sacrifice?" "She is not my daughter." "She is. Kali is as much as your flesh and blood as Sati is." "I'm not discussing this again." "You have thought about it so many times. For once, have the courage to follow through." What will we do in Panchavati? Doesn't matter. What matters is what we will be. Daksha shook his head. And what do you think we will be? We will be happy. But I cannot leave Sati behind. Who's asking you to leave her behind? All I want is to unite my family. What? Why should Sati live in Panchavati? She is not a Naga. You and I have past life sins that have to be atoned, sins for which we have been punished. Why should she be punished? The real punishment is the separation from her sister. The real punishment is to see her father being humiliated every day. Daksha remained silent, wavering. Daksha, trust me, said Virini. We will be happy in Panchavati. If there was any other place where we could live with both Kali and Sati, I would suggest that, but there isn't. Daksha breathed deeply. But how? You leave that to me. I will make the arrangements. Just say yes. Your father is leaving tomorrow for Karachappa. You are not so badly injured that you can't travel. We will be in Panchavati before he knows you're gone. Daksha stared at Virini. But trust me, please trust me. It will be for all our good. I know you love me. I know you love your daughters. I know you don't care about anything else. Just trust me. Daksha nodded. Virini smiled, bent closer, and kissed her husband. I will make the arrangements. A happy Virini turned and walked out of the room. She had a lot to do. As she stepped out, she saw Sati and Parvateshwar sitting outside. She patted Sati on her head. Go in, my child. Tell your father how much you love him. He needs you. I will be back soon. As Virini was hurrying away, she saw Brahmanayak back towards her husband's chamber. The Meluhan queen was jolted back to the present by some dolphin calls. The more than a century-old memory still drew a tear from her eyes. She turned to look at her husband and shook her head. She had never really understood what happened that day. What had Brahmanayak said? All she knew was that when she had gone back to Daksha's chamber the next day with their escape plans, he had refused to leave. He had decided that he wanted to become emperor. Your stupid ego and need for approval from your father destroyed our lives. The secret? Asked Shiva, recalling his conversation with Parshuram. Shiva was sitting with Parshuram, Parvateshwar, Veerbhadra and Nandi. Kali had just entered the chamber. Ganesh, still unsure of his position vis-a-vis Shiva, was standing quietly at the back. Shiva had acknowledged Sati's eldest son with a short nod, nothing more. Yes, I think you need to know, said Kali. It is India's need that the Nilkant know the secret the Nagas have been keeping. Thereafter you can decide whether what we have done is right or wrong. Determine what must be done now. Why can't you tell me here? I need you to trust me. I can't. Shiva's eyes bored into Kali's. He could see no malice or deceit in them. He felt he could trust her. How many days will it take to reach Panchavati? A little more than a year, answered Kali. A year? Yes, Lord Nilkant. We will travel up to Branga by river boats, right down the Madhumati river, then travel by foot through the Dandak Aranya. The journey takes time. There is no direct route? Kali smiled, but refused to be drawn in. She didn't want to reveal the secrets of the forest of Dandak. It was the primary defense for her city. I am trusting you, but it appears that you don't trust me. I trust you completely, Lord Nilkant. Shiva smiled, understanding Kali's predicament. She could trust him, but not everyone with him. All right, let's go to Panchavati. It is perhaps the route I have to take in order to discharge my duty. Shiva turned to Parvateshwar. Can you make the arrangements, General? It will be done, my lord. said Parvateshwar. Kali bowed towards Shiva and turned to leave, stretching her hand out to Ganesh. And Kali, said Shiva. Kali spun around. I prefer Shiva, not Nilkant. You are my wife's sister, your family. Kali smiled and bowed her head. As you wish, Shiva. Shiva and Sati were at the Vishwanath temple. They had come to perform a private puja seeking Lord Rudra's blessing. Having completed their prayers, they sat against one of the pillars of the temple, looking out towards the idol of Lady Mohini, whose statue was at the back of Lord Rudra's idol. Shiva reached out for his wife's hand and kissed it lightly. She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. A very intriguing lady, said Shiva. Sati looked up at her husband. Lady Mohini? Yes. Why isn't she universally accepted as a Vishnu? Why has the number of Vishnus stopped at 7? There may be more Vishnus in the future, but not everyone regards her as a Vishnu. Do you? At one point of time I didn't, but now I have come to understand her greatness. Shiva frowned. It's not easy to understand her, said Sati. There were many things that she did which can be considered unjust. It does not matter that she did those things to the Asuras. They were still unfair. To Suryavanshis who follow the absolutes of Lord Ram, she is difficult to understand. So what has changed now? I have come to know more of her, about why she did what she did. So I still don't appreciate some of the things that she did, but perhaps I have more compassion for her actions. A Vasudev had once told me that they believe Lord Rudra could not have completed his mission without her support. Sati looked at Shiva. They may be right, maybe, just maybe. Sometimes a small sin can lead to a greater good. Shiva stared at Sati. He could see where she was going with this. If a man has been good all his life, despite the unkindness he has faced, if he has helped others, we should try to understand why he committed what appears to be a sin. We may not be able to forgive him, however, we may be able to understand him. Shiva knew Sati was talking about Ganesh. Do you understand why he did what he did? Sati took a deep breath. No. Shiva turned his gaze towards Lady Mohini's statue. Sati pulled Shiva's face back towards her. Sometimes it's difficult to understand an event without knowing everything that led up to it. Shiva turned his face away. He shut his eyes and breathed deeply. He saved your life. He saved Karthik's life. For that I must love him. He has done much to make me think that he is a good man. Sati remained silent. But Shiva took a deep breath. But it's not easy for me, Sati. I just can't. Sati sighed. Perhaps going Panchavati may make everything clear. My lord, what are you saying? How can I? Asked a flabbergasted Dilipa. He was sitting at Maharishi Vrigu's feet in his private chambers in his palace at Ayodhya. Prime Minister Siamantak had become a past master at keeping Vrigu's frequent visits to Ayodhya a secret. The Maharishi's medicines were working their magic. Dilipa was looking healthier with every passing day. Are you refusing to help, your highness? Vrigu's voice was menacing, eyes narrowed. No, my lord, of course not, but this is impossible. I will show you the way. But how can I do it all by myself? You will have allies, I will guarantee that. But an attack? Such as this? What if someone finds out? My own people will turn against me. Nobody will find out. Dilipa looked disturbed. What have I got myself into? Why? Why is this needed, Maharishi-ji? For the good of India. Dilipa remained silent, worry lines on his face. Vrigu knew the self-obsessed Dilipa would not particularly care about the larger cause, so he decided to make it very personal. You also need to do this, Your Highness, if you want to prevent disease from eating up your body. Dilipa stared at Vrigu. The threat was clear and overt. He bowed his head. Tell me how, Maharishi-ji. Within 2 months of the Naga Queen's request to Shiva, Parvateshwar had made arrangements for travelling to Panchavati. Shiva's entourage had grown considerably since the time he had sailed into the city where the supreme light shines. Accompanying Shiva on the voyage was his entire family, as the Mahadev refused to leave Sati and Kartik behind. Kali and Ganesh obviously had to be there. Veerbhadra and Nandi were fixtures of the Nilkant's retinue. And Veerbhadra had insisted on his wife Kritika accompanying him this time, not just because they missed each other, but also as he knew she would not be able to bear parting company from Kartik for so long. Ayurvati was the obvious choice with the physician on board. Shiva also wanted Bhagirath and Parshuram with him, and Parvateshwar, his general and security head, could not leave without Anandamayi. Parvateshwar had arranged for 2 brigades to travel with them, so 2,000 soldiers, both Chandravanshi and Suryavanshi, travelled in a fleet of 9 ships along with the royal vessel carrying the Nilkant and his close aides. Vishwadhumna, the loyal Branga follower of Ganesh, and his platoon were also commissioned into the Chandravanshi brigade. They sailed slowly so they could keep all the ships together. 2 months had passed since they had left Kashi when they neared Vaishali. Remembering his conversation with Gopal, the chief of the Vasudevs, Shiva turned towards Bhadra, Nandi and Parshuram. All of them except Nandi were smoking pot on the deck, contemplating the river. Apparently, Lord Manu had said that good and evil are 2 sides of the same coin, said Shiva, breaking the silence of the moment, taking the chilam from Parshuram. Parshuram frowned. I have heard this too, but I could never make sense of it. Shiva took a deep drag of the marijuana, exhaled, and passed the chilam to Veerbhadra. What do you make of it, Bhadra? Frankly, a lot of what your Vasudev friends say is mumbo-jumbo. Shiva burst out laughing. So did his friends. I wouldn't quite say that, brave Veerbhadra. A surprised Shiva turned around to find Ganesh behind them. Shiva fell silent, all traces of humour dropping from him. Parshuram immediately bowed his head to Ganesh, but did not say anything, out of fear of angering the Nilkant. Veerbhadra, who was growing increasingly fond of the Lord of the People and believed him to be a man of integrity, asked, So what would you make of it, Ganesh? I would think it's a clue, said Ganesh, smiling at Veerbhadra. Clue? Asked Shiva, intrigued. Maybe for the Nilkant to understand what he should be searching for? Carry on. Good and evil are 2 sides of the same coin, so the Nilkant has to find one side of a coin, right? Shiva frowned. Is it possible to find one side of a coin? Asked Ganesh. Shiva slapped his forehead. Of course. Search for the whole coin instead. Ganesh nodded, smiling. Shiva stared at Ganesh. A germ of an idea was forming in the Nilkant's mind. Search for good, and you shall find evil as well. The greater the good, the greater the evil. Veerbhadra held out the chillam to Ganesh. Would you like to try some? Ganesh had never smoked in his life. He looked at his father and couldn't read what was written in those deep, mysterious eyes. I would love to. He sat down and took the chillam from Veerbhadra. Place it in your mouth like so, said Veerbhadra, demonstrating by cupping his hands, and breathe in deeply. Ganesh did as he was told, collapsing in a severe bout of coughing. Everyone burst out laughing except Shiva, who continued to stare at Ganesh, straight-faced. Veerbhadra stretched out to pat Ganesh on his back and took the chillam away from him. Ganesh, you have never been touched by this evil. No, but I'm sure I'll grow to like it, smiled an embarrassed Ganesh, glancing for a moment at Shiva as he reached out for the chillam again. Veerbhadra drew it out of reach. No, Ganesh, you should remain innocent. The fleet was at the gates of Branga. Parvateshwar, Anandamai and Bhagirath had transferred into the lead ship to supervise operations. I have seen it before. I know, said Anandamai, staring at the gates. But I still get amazed at their sheer ingenuity. Parvateshwar smiled and put his arm around Anandamai, and almost immediately, much to Anandamai's annoyance, he turned back to take the task at hand. Uttanka, the second ship is not high enough. Tell the Brangas to fill more water into the pool. Unnoticed by Parvateshwar, Anandamai raised her eyebrows and shook her head slightly. Then she turned her husband's face and kissed him lightly. Parvateshwar smiled. All right, you lovebirds, said Bhagirath. Keep a lid on it. Anandamai laughed and slapped her brother on his wrist. Parvateshwar smiled and turned towards the gate to supervise the crossing. This crossing will go well, General, said Bhagirath. Relax, we know what the Brangas are doing. There are no surprises here. Parvateshwar turned to Bhagirath with a frown. He was surprised the Ayodhyan prince had used the term general. He could tell his brother-in-law was trying to say something, but was very cautious. Out with it, Bhagirath. What are you trying to say? We know the path here, said Bhagirath. We know what the Brangas are doing. There will be no surprises. But we have no idea what route the Nagas will lead us on. Only the Almighty knows what surprises they may have in store. Is it wise to trust them so blindly? We are not trusting the Nagas, Bhagirath, interrupted Anandamai. We are trusting the Nilkant. Parvateshwar remained silent. I am not saying we shouldn't trust the Mahadev, said Bhagirath. How can I? But how much do we know of the Nagas? We are going through the dreaded Dandak forest with the Nagas as our guides. Am I the only one concerned here? Listen, said an irritated Anandamai. Lord Nilkant trusts Queen Kali. That means I will trust her, and so will you. Bhagirath shook his head. What do you say, Parvateshwar? The Lord is my Lord. I will walk into a wall of flames if he orders me to, said Parvateshwar as he looked towards the bank where accumulator machines had just been released, pulling their ship forward with tremendous force. The Meluhan general turned to Bhagirath. But how can I forget that Ganesh killed Brahaspati, the greatest scientist of Meluha? That he destroyed the heart of our empire, Mount Mandar. How can I trust him after all this? Anandamai looked at Parvateshwar and then at her brother, uncomfortably. "No, Kritika," said Ayurvati, "I am not doing it." Kritika and Ayurvati were in the Meluhan doctor's office on the royal ship. The hooks on the sideboards of their ship were being attached onto the machine that would pull it through the gates of Branga. Practically everyone on the vessel was on the deck to see this marvelous feat of Branga engineering in action. Kritika had used the time to meet Ayurvati without Veerbhadra's knowledge. "Ayurvati ji, please, you know I need it." "No, you don't, and I'm sure if your husband knew, he would say no as well." "He doesn't need to know." "Kritika, I am not doing anything to put your life in danger. Is that clear?" Ayurvati turned around to prepare a medicine for Kartik. He had cut himself while practicing with Parvateshwar. Kritika saw her chance. There was a pouch lying on Ayurvati's table. She knew this was the medicine she desperately craved. She slipped it quietly into the folds of her Angavastram. "My apologies for disturbing you," said Kritika. Ayurvati turned around. "I'm sorry if I appear rude, Kritika, but it is your own interests." "Please don't tell my husband." "Of course not," said Ayurvati, "but you should tell Veerbhadra yourself, right?" Kritika nodded and was about to leave the room when Ayurvati called out to her. Pointing towards Kritika's Angavastram, Ayurvati said, "Please leave it behind." Embarrassed, Kritika slowly slipped her hand into her Angavastram, took the pouch out and left it on the table. She looked up, eyes moist and pleading. Ayurvati held Kritika's shoulder gently. "Haven't you learned anything from the Nilkant? You are a complete woman exactly the way you are. Your husband loves you for who you are and not for something you can give him." Kritika mumbled a soft apology and ran from the room.